Hello and welcome to The Art of Growth. This is Jim Zartman, and today the whole crew's here. I will be talking with Joel Hubbard and Hillary Kay, and we together are all going to be talking about Enneagram stereotypes. The Enneagram is not supposed to put people into boxes, and yet so much of what we see in the Enneagram world out there, people are doing just that and reducing people to stereotypes. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. But before we get started, the hub of all of our work is theartofgrowth.org. And if you do not know your type, go there and take a free Enneagram test and a free instincts test, an instincts variant test, the combination of which gives you a greater picture of who you are. And that is also the spot where you can reach out to us for coaching. Maybe you just need one session to redirect your life or to figure a few things out. But for those who are looking to make a major change and work with one of us for a while, we now are offering 6-session packages on the website. So you can find that under coaching at theartofgrowth.org. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into my conversation with Joel Hubbard and Hillary Kay. Okay, so we made a Instagram post where we were asking folks to suggest topics, things that you'd like us to cover. And so we're going to do some of those in different formats. We're going to find different outlets to answer some of those questions or to try and take on some of those topics. But one of these is common stereotypes that each type is often reduced to and how to think about them in a better way. So let's talk a little bit about common stereotypes for each of the types. Should we just start with the one? What is the common stereotypes about the one? I can't think of like common stereotypes without thinking of like Enneagram and meme culture, something that makes me very pissed off. And I try to not be too reactive against it, but I'm like the reductionistic kind of things because I get it. It's clever, but I think it's caused more harm than good maybe. So yeah, that's just something that I thought about when it came to this topic.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a meme. It's more of like certain descriptions that people will have or the assumptions they have about ones. For example, ones are all super rigid types that have no, flexibility, that they are so dogmatic and black and white in their thinking. Certainly, they can be that. But there are ones that don't do that nearly as much. But I think one that can be super confusing and what has confused a lot of type ones is that they are all highly detail oriented. Mm-hmm. And that is not true.
Nope.
So that has been a confusing thing for a number of type ones we've typed.
Yeah. Or, even along that lines of detail oriented, that they're highly organized. That they're all extremely organized. I'm like, no, not necessarily.
Right.
I definitely know ones that aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah, like their house is completely in order and they're very, they have, color-coded schedules for everything. And boy, do I know some ones who are the complete opposite of that. And I'm like, come on, bring that stereotype up just a little bit, please.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that they're all about rules. I think the stereotype of the one is that they don't have fun and they're just very serious. And it's all about this super have to do this, that moralistic thing. And that they don't loosen up and have a good time. And that's just not really true. So that's one of the things that come to mind for that one.
Yeah. The other one is that none of them express emotion or are emotionally expressive, so they're very tight, they're very repressed. And that isn't true for some type ones. Some type ones are actually very expressive emotionally. Yeah.
Or even that they always think they're right. Because sometimes they're right, and as they're constantly questioning themselves. Joel you and I were talking about this the other day, is how they'll just go back and forth. A lot of them will go back and forth between, well, am I right? But are you right? Because you have this strong opinion, I have this, and then where that tension is. So sometimes where the rigidity breaks down, and they're that questioning of themselves comes into play. I think that sometimes when people are like, well, you just think you're always right. It's no, that's not necessarily true for the ones.
Yeah.
We saw that in the Being a Student of Your Story panel with the
one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A lot. How it was I was uncertain of what was right. So I just trusted this person in my life. So it's definitely, not that I think I'm right, like all the time, because they're very critical of themselves. And am I making the right decision? Well, I don't know. So I'll listen to,
Or that I can't be wrong as a type 1. Like I can't be wrong. I don't like being told that I'm wrong. Like there was stuff in the even written literature stuff out there that said that type 1s don't respond well to feedback, negative feedback. And that has not been, by and large, the many, many type 1s we've interacted with and typed have said, no, actually, I prefer you telling me where I have fallen short. The other thing is that they don't like the word perfectionistic. Some of them don't like it. Some of them totally own it. Like, oh yeah, that's me. Others, it's not a matter of owning it. Others are just like, no, I don't relate to that because I don't think I'm ever perfect or that I have achieved perfection. And so there's resistance to that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Type 2.
That they're always nice because they're not.
Very true. That they're always helpful.
So this sort of like, oh, you're just so sweet. You just kind of go along. You're just a sweet person who wants to help people all the time. But it's like, no, there's an agenda behind that. There's something that's going on behind the scenes. They're wanting some reciprocity. And although I've had 2 say that they didn't.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and there's some 2s that are very there are some 2s that are absolutely warm, nice, sweet.
Yeah.
But there are 2s that are not. They're more of the feisty types.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll be more like pushing and, assertive and a little bit aggressive. So you have that there as well.
Yeah.
The motivation, and this is the thing we have to come back to, the core motivation remains the same. But the expression of it, like I'm trying to get this need met through actually sometimes being more assertive, through yes, I'm going to help you and we're going to get there. We're going to do this thing.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too that they don't always want to help. I had my best friend's a 2, and I automatically assumed that she really enjoyed like helping planning parties and get-togethers and stuff. And she was like, I actually hate it. Like sometimes I like it, but I like it when I'm the one volunteering, not when I'm told like, oh, you are always so good at helping plan parties, or events. Like you should totally take the lead on this one. Does she do it? Yes. But there's then resentment behind it because it wasn't, her idea. She was like voluntold instead of,
Got it.
She didn't volunteer.
Yeah. I think some 2s get that sort of the myth of subservience. Like you're going to just kind of go along with other people. But I've had a 2 tell me, they're like, oh no, when I'm put in that position, I become an 8-hole. And they referred to their like line to the 8. Like, no, I can get very kind of aggressive back in someone's face if I'm sort of put in that position, because it almost has to come from like their own motivation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also that there are some 2s that will say, I don't tune in very much to my own emotions, or I struggle with even knowing what they are. But there are other 2s that know very much what they're feeling. Many of them will say, I do know what I'm feeling, but my attention doesn't stay there. It goes towards other people and towards what other people are feeling. So that tends to be the way it shows up. And then also 2s don't ask for what they need. That's a minefield. If you've ever done this with groups of 2s, 2s don't, generally ask for what they need. You will get 2s who will say, what are you talking about? I always ask for what I need. But what they're meaning by that is very different than what you might think, which is that they are willing to ask for help for physical things like, can you help do this? Can you pick up that? Can you grab a hold of this? Can you do that? They may not have a problem doing that. Some other 2s do. It's like, I can't even ask that. But then when it comes to things of like, but do you ask for things that you really need at a deeper level? And that's where they say, no, heck no.
Yeah.
Like I don't. Or if they think that they do, many of them have said that they think they've asked that before. But I think what happened is for all of us types, there are moments where we exit our pattern and we test something and it fails. And then we just revert back to our good old patterns.
Well, for the two, too, it's so contingent on the context of that relationship.
Yeah, 100%.
And sometimes with the most intimate relationships, they actually ask for a need, but it's not the real thing. Like you're saying, it's like some adjacent thing. Like what I really want is to be seen and connected and feel like you want to spend time with me. But what I'm asking for is, can you plan for us to do something? Can you like ask me to do something? And there's like, that's the thing they're asking for. But what they're really wanting is like, do you see me and want to be around me? And so it's that the adjacent ask, I think, sometimes confuses the receiver.
Yeah. How about the type 3?
Well, my annoyance of a type 3 stereotype is that we all really enjoy working out. And we like to, run marathons and just really test the limits, that way and be the best. I have zero desire to run a mile ever again in my life. Having a gym membership is like the least appealing thing to me.
Yeah.
And when I see talking about the memes, the, Instagram memes, it's all like, it's so focused on
appearance.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, there is some truth to that for sure. And I am for sure guilty of it, but not in that way. And
but along those lines, it's like that they always want to like be the center of attention or in the spotlight or the show. Like there's definitely a lot of threes that do not want that.
Right.
Yeah, that makes them uncomfortable. They feel kind of on the spot, or that can feel very exposing to some of them. And so that is definitely not a true stereotype.
Yeah, or that they read emotions because they're in the heart center or the heart triad. And there are plenty of threes who do not. They do not read emotion, and they feel like because of that, there's a problem with them. Like I must have a problem because I can't pick up on social cues. So they're socially awkward threes who don't know what to do in a social space.
Yeah. And then also that all threes are confident. Gosh, you guys all are just so confident. You look so confident all the time. And there's a difference between looking confident and being confident. And that's one that gets a little sticky.
Yeah. And I think one that they do to themselves that goes back and forth with themselves is my adaptability versus my inauthenticity. And so people either perceive them as inauthentic when they're trying to be authentic. And so they can get an assumption made about them that way, right? Like, well, you're just playing the role, but it's not real for you. Versus like the adaptability is like, no, this is not a role. Like adaptability is actually a skill. And I actually do enjoy living in this world. When I think of, there's stereotypes about them, but when I think of one of the ways that people stereotype them and treat them a certain way because of that, that's one that I see a lot.
Yeah. I mean, if I had a quarter for every time I was called fake in my life, I would be a multimillionaire.
Really?
Yeah, that's rough. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for each type, I mean, if we were to go back to the 1 and the 2, there's that for them as well, where, there are ways that people, so this could turn into a podcast about all our frustrations with the Enneagram culture that has, it's just all kinds of nonsense out there and things that are just not true. And I wonder if people have actually spent enough time with all these different types.
Right.
Like, where did you pick this up? And do you have a friend that happens to be this type and you've got the stereotype now?
Yep.
Or did you actually spend time with a bunch of different type 3s or a bunch of different type 4s? And
all 4s are like Sally. Therefore, I don't like any 4s because they're like Sally. And
all 4s are just, these emotional handbaskets, and it's like, no, there's some 4s that actually are very, very controlled externally. You wouldn't know that they have the range of emotion or that even the features. We could do the whole thing on the features of the types and how they're put into negative terms in Enneagram culture. And that is also tremendously unhelpful. It really pisses me off because it harms people when we just like, well, you're just judgmental because you're a 1. It's like, okay, can we reclaim that word and reclaim it in a good way? 1s have the capacity oftentimes on their high side to be able to discern the difference between good and bad, a good action versus a bad action. Why would we say that that's a bad thing to be able to do, right?
Yeah. We all make judgment calls.
Yeah, we all do. Absolutely.
We all think this way of living is better than living this way. We all make these calls, and it's good to make those calls.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I think is beautiful and redemptive is like, take all these features and let's speak about them as neutrally as we can, not as positive. That's the other danger, is to sort of like go with, oh, every type is wonderful and there's nothing. No, we have our shadow side, right? But there's this neutral aspect to all the features of the types. Yeah. And so I'm glad you brought that up with the 3 being a chameleon. It's like, oh yeah, you're a social chameleon. So that turns into a negative thing. It's immediately like, oh yeah, you shouldn't be that. You should be your authentic self. As if the authentic self is only one version. And there's no single person I've ever met who has one version of who they are. We are multiple versions at different stages of our lives. We've changed multiple times over the years.
Yeah, and I've had 3 clients judge themselves for this. They end up taking on that story, and I'm like, no, your adaptability is authentic. It is authentic for you to be adaptable because you are not as fixed. And the higher authenticity is you're actually trying to honor the person and connect to the person in front of you. And your adaptability is a skill set in which you do that.
Yeah.
I could cry.
Do you feel seen? Do you feel seen right now?
But that's why these things, this topic is important.
Yeah.
Or it's so let's do the 2, because in fairness, I'd like to, suddenly we're moving in this direction. It's wonderful. But for the 1 and the 2, so like, yes, for each type, there's something that they've been accused of. That's actually like your capacity as a 1 to see good and bad and to be able to see the imperfections. Absolutely. And that idealism that drives you, thank God for that, because the world is a better place. And there would be a lot of products out there, such as watches, right, Jim, that would not have the precision they have without people that pay attention to things like that, to proper order, to things that work right and work well. And attention to detail.
Yeah, I'm like, I want my CPA and my luthier to be like that kind of specific. Like, I appreciate that skill set, and everyone does somewhere,
Yeah.
And the 1 gets to choose to where they apply that the most. And typically 1s apply that skill set or that drive in different areas.
Absolutely. Yeah. It can be in the social sphere, or it can be in watches. Yeah. What's something we can say redemptively about 2s that sometimes get used negatively?
That they're just kind of doing this. You're just doing this to be liked. You're just doing this so that I see you in a certain way, which is another like dig at inauthenticity. Or is this thing you're doing to be liked, is it a manipulation?
Yeah, helping or connecting, trying to make that connection with a person is viewed as purely like manipulative, as like you're helping in order to get something out of it.
Right.
Well, that's partly true at times, as it is for, again, all the features serve either our low side or our high side. It's absolutely true. And I try to balance that out with clients. Like, okay, I think you've gone way dark on that feature, and it's like all bad. What's the good part about that? Or, it's all good. Okay, what's the shadow side of that? So it's both and. But absolutely, there are 2s that just like will tell me, and I've said this to 2s. I've said, yeah, but you love helping, and there's such a joy when you can be the hero. And I redeem even that idea of being a hero in someone's life as something beautiful. Like, absolutely. Doesn't it feel wonderful to be the person that came in at the right time and served them and helped them out of a dark place? That's just fantastic. And you made that connection. And now you're closer together as a result of that. Beautiful. Type 4.
Type 4, that you're all artists.
Yeah. That stresses so many of them out. Like, failing life because I'm not an artist, Yeah.
So they're all creative. They all want to just like live in this esoteric, creative, dreamy world. And that's just not like, I have into so many 4s that are incredibly practical.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that they're just Debbie Downers. They just are going to always see or stay in that negative. And I've met a couple of 4s who like, they don't want to talk about the negative, whether that's in their own life or someone else's life. They just like want to connect and go deep. And going deep doesn't mean that you have to explore like the ugly. Like going deep can just be in a variety of different ways.
Or just that they are always kind of like sad or, that Inside Out movie, because they have the sadness character. And I've heard people like refer to that as like the 4. And I'm like, no, that's not it at all. Like that is an emotion, you know, in the heart types, we know that sadness and shame is something that's hovering in the background, but it's not like they're experiencing all the time. They don't, or that they want to,
right.
You know, they want to be happy just like everybody else. It's just, they have to like dig through it, or even sometimes bottom out their emotions in order to come back up, but they still want to come back up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, let me say one more thing too about the 4 is the idealism that they have that seems to be sometimes viewed as a problem. You're too idealistic. You know, the mundane and the average is just really difficult for them. And so they can feel bad that other people are super practical and super ordinary and super, you know, process and plan oriented, and they're not. They feel one down as a result of that. And I remind them, like, yeah, but there's a tremendous high side to that idealism, right? Because it helps to shape the world in a more beautiful way. And so that's something that's also can be hard on type 4s.
Hey, we're going to interrupt this episode for a moment to say sometimes we hit a point where we need a little guidance. We need someone who will come alongside us and amplify the best of our voice so that we can navigate the road that is ours to walk and ours to make. If you are interested in having myself, Jim Zartman, Joel Hubbard, or Hillary Kay walk with you in that way, you can reach out to us for a single session to try it out, or we now have 6-session packages available on our website, theartofgrowth.org, under the coaching section. All right, back to this episode.
Type 5s, headspace.
Yeah, for the 5, the first stereotype that comes to mind is that they're kind of cold, or they don't really want to be like close in relationship.
They don't feel, they don't have emotions. Like they don't. Yeah.
Well, they used to always make jokes about they are like Spock, right? Yeah. And I think I've probably been guilty of that, where it's just like, well, it's not that. Because Spock had emotion, but like there's this like logic first kind of thing to a fault, right? And yes, just because they care a lot about logic and thinking and processing doesn't mean that they're logical to a fault, which is what the assumption that some can jump to about them.
Another one is that they're all very book smart. Like I've met a couple of 5s that are like, I didn't love school. I did not get straight A's, but I'm very passionate about the topics that I'm passionate about and will, gather resources around that topic. But like I've heard time and time again, oh, they're the experts. They're the professors. They're the, people who are stereotypically book smart. But that's not the case for all 5s. Not everyone loves, not all 5s love school and love, learning in that way.
Yeah. Some of them are in the field of construction. And so they're going to tend to be more interested in that space, in that world. And then, some other 5s have said, yeah, I don't find myself resourcing myself by trying to gather up as much research or knowledge. Like I do that. Yeah, I love that. It's always interesting to me. It's always fun, but it is more people oriented. And so you'll see some 5s that while they can be very process oriented, like that's another thing that we often hear about 5s, very process oriented. Like there's a process by which we do things. And other 5s will say, yeah, maybe, but it's not my entire thing. Like I love to just hang with people. Extroverted appearing 5s, they're not all introverted, that they love being with people. And so then it surprises people. Like you're very engaged in relationships. You talk, you're always and that surprises some people that 5s can be that way.
Moving on to the 6.
Yeah.
So the first thing of the 6 is that you all have anxiety.
That you're all fearful. Like that's the word fear does not. A lot of 6s say, "Man, I just don't relate to fear or safety." Like I've had some say, "I'm really struggling with it." One that went through our group coaching and our early group coaching and loved it and has grown so much. But she's going to be on our podcast again, which is this next round, which is very fun. Cool. But yeah, she said the same thing. She's like, "No, like for me, safety doesn't really show up that way as like a big thing." And so I had to kind of press around a little bit and say, well, what about relationships? And yeah, definitely in the relationships. So it's not always that the language again, and this is one of the things that we have tried to work on at the Art of Growth is understating how language is a fluid thing. They are just like containers, and you have to figure out what the meaning is inside that container. And so sometimes you have to ask a follow-up question. Well, so safety isn't a big deal. Are you thinking about physical safety? It's like, yeah, it's not a big deal for me. I never even think about that. So, but like all sixes are afraid of getting mugged or something like that, or they're all looking for
sick. They're all germaphobes.
Yeah,
right?
Germaphobes, right. Yeah, exactly. They walk into a meeting space and immediately they look for the exits. And no, there's plenty of sixes that don't.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But they might be really concerned about the relationship or another realm in which that could happen. Yeah, for sure.
Well, and that also that they're not all negative people. Like sixes are often perceived as negative because they're seeing that they have the ability, right? That's where we can talk about the redemptive of the six is they have the ability to see all of the possibilities that could happen, the good and the bad. And that often they start with the bad so they can get to like having the, successful or the positive experience, but they need to, okay, let's start with this. Let's get through this. And then we can enjoy this, this process. So they're not negative. Yeah. They're just, they have this wonderful ability to see all the potential things that could happen.
Or that they all get stuck in immobility.
Yeah.
Like they just don't do it. They get stuck and then they freeze and they don't do so. Like the fight, fright, fleeing, fawning.
Freeze. Yeah.
Which one would they do? It's like, well, they do them all. So depending on the six, you will have some that do freeze and then you'll have some that fight. So it's, there's not this consistency around how sixes respond to anxiety by indecision or immobility. Some of them they all get stuck in overthink, and decision making can be tough, but you have some sixes that make very impulsive decisions, very quick and very impulsive as a reaction to that fear. So that's another thing that's oftentimes confusing to people because you can meet aggressive and assertive sixes. And again, the whole thing of like, you shouldn't be so concerned about a lot of things and that like your worst case scenario thinking is just flat out wrong. It's not true. And that's another thing. It's like, that's a feature. And thank God for that high side because the world is a safer place and a better place because sixes can ferret out those threats very early on. They can see where the dominoes are falling and what is coming down the road.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that bothers me is the way that sixes are sometimes treated as, well, you're just being a negative Nancy, or why you always got to play devil's advocate. And then there's a moralizing toward them in how they're trying to make sure we're going the right way. They're trying to think things through. They're trying to make things safe, but it's thought of as like, well, you're just being negative or you're just being a devil's advocate. And so I think it's not just stereotype that we're talking about with all of these types. It's very reductionistic to that, the humanness of that person.
Yeah. We could do a whole thing on the reduction of all the types. Like,
well, that's what stereotypes are, right? So it's all stereotypes are a reductionistic view of someone who is a complex human, who no one fits in a box. This thing that we always come back to and we always say, and people don't seem to want to put you into a box. It's like, well, look at the core motivation. That's the thing that's consistent. All of these things are just are strategies to meet the core motivation, but those strategies are adaptive for all of us. We adapt our strategies based on our context and our situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Type sevens.
Yeah, Joel, what do they accuse you of?
A lot of things. It's endless. I don't know what. There's been some of them like party animal. So class clown, and sure, some sevens are. They are definitely plenty of class clowns, but there are also introverted sevens who are very quiet and tend to prefer not being front and center or getting the attention of the room. So that's also true for a number of sevens.
Well, I've heard them called like adrenaline junkies.
Yeah.
They're just looking for the next fix or the next buzz, or they're commitment-ophobes. Committophobes? What's the word? They fear commitment. They can't make a commitment and follow through on anything. You can't trust them to finish things.
Yep. That's a big one that a lot of sevens don't resonate with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they fear emotion like that, or that they don't experience deep emotion. Like, no, like sevens very much experience deep emotion. How they handle that just appears different, but it doesn't mean it's like not felt inside. Yeah. Like they feel the pain, they feel the sadness or whatever. And just because they might appear a certain way doesn't mean that they don't feel it or experience it.
Yeah. In the whole thing of like too many ideas, like, once again, you're just, there's so many ideas, and that's a bad thing. You're always coming back to something, and I remember feeling this many, many times going back to my staff, my team, and feeling like, oh boy, I always felt the anxiety of, I came up with something that I think might be better than what we have currently. And knowing that I would get the reaction I would get, which was like, negative, and why are you changing things, and why can't we stick to what was, and like, that I'm wanting to upset the apple cart, and it's like, no, I'm not. That's not what my game is. Sometimes it is, but it's not really, not in this moment. In this moment, it's like, I think we can actually get to that destination that we're all wanting to get to, but I just came up with maybe a better way, or so. Right. That was sometimes pretty hard.
Yeah, the accusation comes through. Well, you just want change for change's sake. You're just bored, right? Yeah. That's why you're doing this.
Yeah, why can't you just leave things as they are? That I've heard quite a bit.
Yeah.
Type 8s.
All right, Jim.
Well, I've got to say this one because I've had a few different clients just in the last week and a half where people around me, they don't think I'm really an 8 because I'm really sensitive, or I have a lot of emotion. And so I think people interpret 8s, that tough exterior, as, well, they don't have a lot of emotions, or they're not very sensitive people. And Abby and I were just talking about this, and like, you meet kids, like kids are sensitive. Like every human is sensitive. We all have a soft spot. And I was talking with an 8 client about this who wasn't sure that they were an 8 because of this whole sensitivity thing. I was like, the reason you put the armor on is because you feel everything. I think one of the misnomers about 8s is that they're not very sensitive or not very emotional. It's actually the opposite. They're extremely sensitive, and that's why they put it on. Like when I was in my course with Deb Ooten, she said, oh, I think the 4, 6, and 8 are the three most emotional types of any, but it's what do they present? And I think that's the first thing that comes to mind when I think about a stereotype of an 8, is that they're just so tough and so confident all the time. And it's like, no, you understand, like these are strategies to meet the core motivation of needing to be strong. But the reason they needed to be strong is because of the intense sensitivity.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about that they always want to be in control and always want to be the leader?
Yeah, it's just bull. Like, I would say it is consistent. They don't want to be controlled.
Right.
Because that's a feeling of being disempowered. But like the needing to be in control. I've literally had a well-known Enneagram teacher say, well, if you don't want to be in control, you're not an 8. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
If everything's running smoothly, if everyone's doing good, like, why does someone need to be in control? Like, it's working. I don't. Yeah, that one has definitely bothered me a lot.
Yeah. Or that they create conflicts, that they like conflicts.
They're looking for it.
They're looking for it, and they create it intentionally, Yeah. And so I've coached type 8s who do not like conflict. They said, no, it's not something that I want peace. I've heard plenty of 8s say, I'm looking for peace. Of course, when I ask them, how do you generate it? They're like, well, by confronting the truth, by dealing with things that are sometimes hidden in relationships. I surface them because that's the way towards peace. It's like, okay, right. So that's the 8. That's the style of the 8. But it's not like you enjoy the conflict. No, but I will name the elephant in the room because that's the way we move forward. And that's the way we can actually experience deeper connection to one another.
Yep.
And so thus they are sometimes experienced as, why are you stirring the pot? But Others are I've met 8s who do not like, they're like, nope, I'm not going to be the one that creates conflict. I don't like conflict. And if I do name the elephant in the room, I do it in a way that is thoughtful. I try to be thoughtful about how I do it.
Well, I think the word conflict and challenge got intermingled because the challenge is fun. Like, having a fun argument, a good argument, where everyone's just like, it's very much that's more in the headspace and we're going back and forth on an idea that can create energy and that can be fun. But actual relational conflict that's, again, on the emotional front, no, that's not true. On the Enneagram feelings wheel that we did, like the core, I say for all the body types is peace, that they're doing these things because they're trying to get to peace. So I think all 8s are actually trying to get to peace. It's just, well, we can't actually have peace if things are hidden, if things are unsaid, if there's hidden agendas, then we don't actually have peace. And I want actual peace, which means dealing with these things. But the point is to get to a point where we don't have to. Yeah, they're born with the sword in their hand, but they don't want to die with the sword in their hand.
That's really good.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think that's a very interesting remark that all of them, the 8, 9, and the 1, all 3 want peace, and there's 3 different ways of going about doing that. So it's like,
and I actually think we can piggyback off of what we were just saying with the 8 and go to the 9. Is that like often 9s, like, oh, they won't be in any conflict. They won't start a conflict. They are the meat. Well, no. Like, I know plenty of 9s who will like start conflict to actually bring peace. Like, no, like we need to come to a consensus. And in order to come to the consensus, there is some conflict that has to be held. Like, conflict can be a positive thing. And I think when the 9 does enter into conflict, they're doing it in a way that has more of a positive connotation, that it might not seem as conflictual because of their disposition, but like they're not conflict averse. Like they just go about it in a different way.
Yeah. Well, I would say that they're conflict averse when it comes to conflict with them personally. So almost all 9s will say, when it comes to me, and like someone's got an issue with me because I did something or didn't do something, that's extremely difficult. But if it's external to them, some 9s don't have a problem with that. They'll say, I know some 9s who they'll say to my spouse, to my partner, I have no problem saying what I think, but to outside of that, I do. So it depends a lot on the sphere. But, it is going to be safety knowing that it won't be a problem. But when they feel like they're the problem in the relationship, that's really hard. So that's where they can become very avoidant.
Yeah. I think this whole thing about 9s, well, they don't really have a strong opinion. Well, not about everything, but about some things, they have real strong opinions. Yeah. Like real strong. But that doesn't mean that, but they're not going to like throw it out there as quickly or aggressively as some other types might. So, and they still want to hear your perspective on it, even if they completely disagree. So this thing that they don't have an opinion, and if they didn't speak up and disagree, that meant they agree with you. Like that really causes a lot of problems. Like, well, you should have told me you disagreed with me. Well, you never asked. I just listened to your opinion, and I went away just disagreeing with you. And I nodded, and it didn't seem worth it. Because I think that's the biggest thing with the 9 is it's not always that they're avoiding or they don't have an opinion, but they're always measuring, is this worth it? Because to me, like, everything's worth it. Like, a lot of 9s, like, it's gotta be worth it.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that they're always calm. Like they all just have this calm, laid back disposition. I know some fiery 9s.
Well, but you must know them well enough to like let that out. Yeah. Because with a lot of 9s, the external is calm, but the internal is like never calm.
Yeah. They can be, or that they're all introverted or quiet. That's not.
Yeah, not at all.
Some very leader type 9s that are very like to be in that role. They're not like grasping at it necessarily, but they enjoy facilitating groups and in group conversation and group projects. And then, one of them is also that they don't have a lot of emotion. or that they don't feel a lot of emotion because they're not expressing it. That a lot of people think that because they're being quiet about something, that therefore they're just like, I don't have anything to say. And I think that is where some nines have to be given that space to like talk and to give them that space to kind of engage in that for a minute. Otherwise, they'll continue to believe they don't matter and that their thoughts don't matter and that their views don't matter.
Because they want to be asked. Yeah.
It's a thing of respect too, and it's a value for nines. Like, it's a mutual regard issue for them. It's like, I regard your views with value. I hope you do with mine. There's that. This is where it's interesting how reciprocity shows up in a lot of different types. It's like, will you do for me what I do for you? Yeah, that's a big one. And that creates a lot of, eventually creates anger and resentment for nines when it's like, I don't know that I matter much because people aren't coming to me and asking me and pursuing me and wanting to know what I think and feel.
Yeah, those are a lot of really good ones for all of these different types because, again, we're hoping that the people who are listening to us and learning from us are not putting people in a box and not stereotyping or lumping all sevens in with my one friend Dan, who just seems like yada, 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 whatever, fill in the blank, fill in the story. I think that's why we've really prioritized a lot of these panels and stuff like that. We want larger sample sizes, and we've had, hundreds of people on the podcast over the years and thousands take the tests and all that stuff. Is because we're trying to get rid of this reductionistic thinking. Like, people are not that simple, and they're amazing. And a lot of times what we're doing with the stereotypes is we're actually creating more distance between them, or we're putting them in a position where they have to defend themselves, or they're wanting to like get away from things like the Enneagram when it could be a useful tool, which we've seen in like companies that we've worked with, right? So I think it takes a lot of skill to help to navigate how to best connect to that person, how to best connect. And like, I'm being married to a 9, I talk about I have to hack the 9, which means I have to intentionally create space for her to withdraw, to consider herself, and then come back and have a discussion. But if at the beginning of our relationship, it was all like, hey, if you're not talking about this right now, you're being conflict avoidant, right? So that was like how I interpreted the action and then created a judgment around it, which was completely wrong. So I think this is what we're supposed to be doing, is moving away from that judgment. And how do we actually help that person access the high side of their type and the best of it by not living into any of those stereotypes? So thank you so much for listening. And side note, if you haven't watched Ted Lasso yet, please do. This episode made me think of the darts scene, which is one of the greatest scenes in the history of television, in my opinion. We talk about be curious, not judgmental. So let's stay the course with that. So if you are interested in working with us either individually or with your organization, please reach out to us at theartofgrowth.org. Follow us for some different content on Instagram at just Art of Growth. And I think we're even going to have a TikTok, the Art of Growth Enneagram. Check it out. Okay. This week, my friends, remember that you do not fit into a box, and you are always expanding beyond what you thought you were, and the person you are becoming is someone you can't even imagine yet. And so remember, is everyone around you? And so be curious. And this week, find out something about someone you love that you didn't know before. Grace and growth, my friends.